the way I've described it is this is a thing that I stole from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins was talking about at one point in time, I'm pretty sure it was him, talking about how if you have two ships that are going in the same direction parallel to each other, and one of them just takes a slight turn, as time goes on, that one's going to be so much further off the original path. And that's what I'm worried about with us, is that all this TikTok stuff and all this social media stuff, it's pushing the norm so much further away. Like you were saying before that people pushed back because they went so far with all this craziness that people are pushing back. But what Jordan Peterson has talked about, and I think he's brilliant with this, he's like, what they'll do is they'll push until you say enough, and then they stop, and then they wait, and then they push a little further. And then you wait a while, maybe less than the time before, and then you stop them again. And then this keeps going on for a long time, and you're so much further away from what you agreed upon was acceptable when you initially started. They just keep pushing. They just keep pushing, and you resist a little bit, and then they stop, and then they push a little more. And it comes in waves. And by the end of it, you're in a position that's unrecognizable. And that's kind of where we are right now.
What do you think it's going to take to stop it? I mean, really stop it. Not in waves, but stop it.
Nothing good. I'm a little terrified because I think that the grip that money has, I'm just going to say money. Forget about defining it. The grip that money has over politics and political decisions that are made in this country is unshakable. I don't think that's ever going to get shaken. And the best way to ensure that that grip remains tight is to crack down on what people are allowed to and not allowed to talk about on social media, and to encourage as much chaos like we're currently seeing right now that acts as both valid social issues and gigantic distractions. So all those things that are at the forefront, including the immigrant crisis. I think the immigrant crisis is a fantastic way to get people to start thinking about this new problem than to be thinking about all the problems that existed before this was ever being discussed. That's my fear. My fear is that we've gone past this representative republic that we're supposed to be and into this thing that's controlled by money. And no one seems to be stopping that. No one seems to want to stop it. And the only person that talks about stopping it is Trump. But even he is, people are skeptical about his connections to money and all the different forces that are running this world. It's a fucking sketchy time. It's a really sketchy time.
Well, I think it is. And if you boil it down, I think the backbone of this country is the family. I do. I think the family unit's the backbone of this country.
Of any country.
Yeah. And
of civilization.
And if you let that get eroded, and even if you see families together now, they're all on their phones or they're instead of actually talking to each other. And I tell parents, you should talk to your kids about things that don't matter. And they say, why? And I say, because you got to open that channel so it's wide open when it comes time to talk about things that do matter. If you don't ever talk to your kid until it's critical, it's too late, man. You got to start talking to them about things that don't matter. So when it comes time that they've got a crisis at school or in a relationship or something, they're so used to talking to you that it doesn't feel weird. And so I tell them, talk to them about things that don't matter. So you don't make them feel awkward or on the hot seat. And they can come to you when they really need to talk about things that do matter. And you've got to start talking to them about how to think for themselves and critical thinking that, as I said, is not happening at the universities. And these universities now, let me give you an example. You've heard all this talk about trigger warnings.
Yes.
That's going on in schools and stuff. Trigger warnings don't work. Trigger warnings are exactly the wrong thing to do if somebody's going to be stressed out. And that's not my opinion. There are evidence-based therapies that says if there's something in your life that's going to stress you, You need to learn to cope with it. You need to learn to deal with it. And there are, in therapy, we have like systematic desensitization, immersion therapies, things where you learn if you're afraid of snakes or you're afraid of airplanes or whatever, you have to learn to cope with that because there are going to be snakes in the world. There are going to be airplanes in the world. There are going to be elevators in the world. There are going to be whatever it is that stresses you out. You have to learn to cope with it. Trigger warnings do exactly the other thing. They say, oh, there's something that bothers you. We'll warn you if it's going to come up, and you can go over here and put your head in the sand, pretend it doesn't exist. That doesn't work. What's going to happen when you get out in the world and there's nobody there to say, oh, we're getting ready to talk about something that might upset you, so you get to go in this other room and sit in the dark for a while.
Yeah.
You can't do that. And the research says that trigger warnings themselves create anxiety. Not only do they not lower anxiety, they create anxiety themselves. The vast majority of universities have used trigger warnings. They use trigger warnings for Romeo and Juliet, said, involves suicide. Spoiler alert. Really? So they have access to the same research that I do, which is that trigger warnings don't work, but they do it because they're virtue signaling. They want to do it because it makes them look sensitive, even though it doesn't work. If you want to make somebody feel better, you tell them the truth. You want to make yourself look better, you tell them what they want to hear. That's crazy that they're doing this.
It's crazy that they're doing it in universities to people who are supposed to be learning how to experience life, at least semi-independently. You're on your own. You're there now. You're at a new place. Like, to say that this is how the world is going to be once you get out is insane. So you're not preparing them for
It's
the
like
world.
you're teaching them to go on red and stop on green, and then you hand them the keys. Are you kidding me? That's exactly what they're doing.